Seeing that he was taking things quite hard, Tian contemplated and in the end went with the guidance route. Actually, it's not that big of a deal. Qing sneered. I knew I was right. Is it fun? Were you enjoying watching me act? Now that they were being honest with each other, Qing was now tearing him a new but real one. On the side, Fengxin, was also looking rather awkward at first, but he really couldn't stand listening to Qing anymore. Watch your tone, he said. Qing was pale-faced and thick-skinned, and when blood rushed to his face, it was very obvious, and his entire face was flustered. He whipped his head around. What tone? Don't forget you're one of the jokes. I'm not so generous as you, having been someone's entertainment for so long and still having no complaints. I wasn't trying to watch you guys make fools of yourselves, Tian said. Fengxin also added, stop thinking people are as narrow-minded as you are. Even when that shitty deed of yours landed you in heaven's prison, His Highness still tried to help you. Ha! Well, thanks so much. But me ending up in heaven's prison was all thanks to your son. What? Want to fight? Not afraid to have a son, but afraid of talk? Fengxin really wanted to knock him dead for having raised the subject of his son. Unfortunately, all three of them were bound into balls by that cobweb at the moment, so they couldn't move a muscle and could only curse at each other, all manners and class gone. Tian saw Fengxin was getting red in the face from anger and was afraid that the moment he got aggravated, he would start his whole martial guard cursing the streets act. So he tried wiggling a bit, rolled a few times, and rolled to Qing's side. Qing, can you try turning around a bit? Qing stopped his yelling and took a breath. What do you want? Fengxin is too far. I can't roll over. But since these cobwebs can be ripped apart by teeth, I want to try and see if I can break the bind on your wrists, Tian explained. Qing glared at him for a moment, his expression suddenly cold, like a dead fish watching the heavens. No thanks. I really do want to help, Tian said helplessly. Your Highness possesses the body of 1,000 gold. I can't possibly trouble your greatness, Qing said coldly. Fengxin cursed. What the actual f***? What are you being all sarcastic for at a time like this? He's helping you, trying to save you. So how does he owe you anything, huh? Qing's head shot up. Who asked him for help? Tian, why must you always show up at a time like this? Tian was a little taken aback. Tian remembered vaguely that Qing seemed to have asked him the same thing a long time ago. How did he answer then? He couldn't remember. Is there something wrong with showing up at times like these? Qing laid back down. Either way, I don't need your help. Why? Tian questioned. Sometimes one does need the help of others in order to get by. Don't bother with him anymore, Fengxin said. He's just a show-off and thinks that you helping him would make him lose face. Qing and Fengxin were choking each other's throats on the side, while that wraith butterfly danced leisurely around Tian, shimmering its faint silver light, unhurried and calm. It made Tian remember something, so he immediately changed the subject. Stop arguing, you two. It's more a joke if others were to see you like this. There'll be someone coming to get us out in a bit. Qing said derisively, none in the heavens nor earth will heed calls in this hellish place. Who's going to come save us? Unless it's... Before he finished, he thought of a person, and the end of his thought abruptly stopped. Fengxin, however, asked directly, Crimson Rain Sword Flowers come with you? Qing was doubtful. You trust him that much? You sure he's gonna come? Shilian was confident. He will come. Although Hua Cheng had been behaving oddly this entire way, and there were several times he was almost suspicious that the one next to him was a fake Hua Cheng, instinct also told him that that was impossible. Mu Qing added, even if he came, how would he find this cave? Feng Xin suggested, why don't we holler some more? The more people, the louder the voices. No need, Shilian said. We only need to sit and wait. No, just lie down and wait. Because Hua Cheng and I are joined by a red string. Before he even finished his sentence, he could see Feng Xin and Mu Qing's faces twitching, like some worm had crawled into their ears. What's with those faces? Shilian asked. Don't get me wrong. The red string I'm talking about isn't something so frivolous as the red string of fate. It's a spiritual device. Just a spiritual device. Only then did the two stop their twitching. Feng Xin replied, oh, I see. Mu Qing, on the other hand, was doubtful. And what kind of spiritual device is that? What does it do? It's quite useful, Shilian said. It's a red string tied on both of our hands with an invisible connection in between. One can use this red string to find the other, and as long as one is still breathing, the red string will never break. Before he even finished, the other two couldn't listen anymore and cut him off. How is that different from the red string of fate? It's exactly the same thing. Shilian was taken aback. No, I don't think so. It's different. Think a bit for yourself how it's different, will you? It's very much the same thing, all right? Mu Qing exclaimed. Shilian pondered over it and discovered it's true. The meaning and function of the spiritual device really was quite similar to that red string of fate the more he thought about it. Just as he thought he shouldn't ponder on it anymore, a voice came from above. Gogo, are you down there? The moment he heard that voice, Shilian felt himself relax and instantly looked up. Sanlang, I'm down here. Then he turned to the other two in the pit. You see, I told you he'd come. Seeing how happy he looked, both Feng Xin and Mu Qing were complicated expressions. Hua Cheng didn't peek her head over the edge, but they could all hear his helpless voice. Gogo, I said not to run off. Now what do we do? Hearing his tone of voice, Shilian was taken aback, and his delight faltered. Huh? Is this cobweb difficult to deal with? Can Erming not slash through it either? He seemed to have heard Hua Cheng say faintly, what's difficult isn't the silk. But he wasn't sure if Hua Cheng had actually said it. A brief moment later, Hua Cheng said softly, Erming's not in a good state right now. Shilian thought it strange. Wasn't Erming perfectly fine and energetic the last time? How was it in a bad state now? Next to him, Mu Qing humphed. No need to ask him any more. How can the scimitar Erming be in a bad state? He's clearly looking for an excuse not to help. Don't say that, Shilian said. He felt it was more possible that Erming was being disciplined and Hua Cheng wouldn't allow it to come out. Just as he was thinking this, a black shadow flashed from above, and the next moment, a red-clad figure soundlessly landed right by Shilian's side, and he leaned down to hold his hand. Shilian turned his gaze on him and hurriedly said, Sanlang, why did you jump down too? Watch out for those cobwebs. Sure enough, the white silk strings at the bottom of the pit came attacking. Hua Cheng didn't bother looking back. He casually waved his hands, and hundreds of silver butterflies shielded his back, forming a butterfly armor, and started ruthlessly fighting with those cobwebs. Hua Cheng ripped off the white silk that was binding Shilian and hugged his waist with his left arm, while his right hand shook out a red umbrella. Let's go. The remaining two saw that he had zero intention of saving them and were completely dumbfounded. Have you forgotten something? Shilian hadn't yet spoken, but Hua Cheng looked back. Oh, that's right, he said. Then the heavily wrapped Feng Xin went flying straight into his hand. Hua Cheng handed the sword to Shilian. Go, your sword. That was what was forgotten? Feng Xin and Mu Qing both cried. Hey! Hua Cheng hugged Shilian closer, flinging his right hand to open that red umbrella. Go, hold on tight to me. And that umbrella started flying up, taking the two of them with it. Shilian hugged him tightly as instructed, and just as they were about 6 meters off the ground, the cries of the other two started, and Shilian didn't know whether to cry or to laugh. I won't forget, he said. Then he released Roya from his right hand. That white silk bandage wrapped itself around the two giant cocoons a few times and pulled them out of the pit together. Halfway up, Feng Xin called out, Wait, I've left something behind. What is it? Shilian called from above. A sword, Feng Xin shouted. It's fallen to the corner. Shilian looked down, and sure enough, in the corner of all that white silk, the hilt of a sword was somewhat visible. Thus, he made Roya extend another stretch and wrapped that sword too, taking them all out together. Finally, the four all made it back to above ground. Roya threw out the two thick cocoons onto the ground and instantly wrapped itself back onto Shilian's wrist, trembling slightly, like it was terrified of that white silk that was so much like itself, but much more aggressive and evil. Shilian soothed it while cutting off the cobwebs on the two with Feng Xin. The moment Feng Xin and Mu Qing could move, they both leapt to their feet and ripped at the rest of the cobwebs. Shilian handed Feng Xin the sword that Roya had helped bring up, but when he looked down, he was amazed. This is Hongjing. Nanfeng, your general, repaired the sword. It was an offhand comment, but the moment the words left his lips, he realized how bad it sounded. Feng Xin and Mu Qing were still in the forms of Nanfeng and Fu Yao at the moment, so Shilian had accidentally forgotten that their identities were already exposed and were still going along with their act subconsciously. While the original intent was to be considerate, the effect of this consideration wasn't great, and the two fell into a strange silence. Feng Xin couldn't hide his expression, and awkwardness floated onto his face. He transformed back to his real self and took the sword. Yes, it's repaired. There are plenty of ghosts on Mount Tonglu after all, so using it to flash around makes things somewhat easier. Shilian peeked at the main culprit who shattered Hongjing next to him and cleared his throat softly. Sorry for the trouble. After all, it really wasn't easy to repair a sword shattered to bits. Mu Qing also transformed back to his real self and dusted off the rest of the cobwebs. It's good that it's fixed. After all, so many of the monsters and demons are adept at disguises. So if one isn't good at using the brain, one could only escape being deceived by using Hongjing. Feng Xin was pissed. Who are you calling brainless so passive-aggressively? Think I can't tell? Here they go again. Shilian shook his head and turned to Hua Cheng. Sanlang, I ran off too quickly earlier. Sorry for leaving you behind. Hua Cheng tucked that umbrella away and replied, Don't worry, as long as Gurga doesn't run off like that again. Shilian grinned, but just as he was about to speak, he suddenly saw Mu Qing glance at Hua Cheng. His gaze stopped and he stared, his expression odd. So Shilian said instead, Mu Qing, what's with you? Hearing his question, Mu Qing immediately snapped out of it and gave him a look. Nothing. I've never seen crimson rain sword flower like this, and thought it was curious, that's all. Shilin couldn't fully believe in this explanation. While this certainly should be the first time Mu Qing had seen Hua Cheng's true appearance, it wasn't like he hadn't seen Hua Cheng in his 16, 17-year-old form, and the two skins weren't that different, so why that look? The four left that cave, and only after a few steps, Feng Xin was astonished. What is this place? Mu Qing was also stunned. What's going on? They were trapped at the bottom of the cobweb pit earlier, so they never had the chance to investigate the situation outside. Which was why the moment they came out, they were quite shocked to see that beneath this great, snowy mountain, there was actually such a mysterious, otherworldly place, with cave after cave filled with the numerous, differing, divine statues. This is the cave of 10,000 gods, Shilin explained. Mu Qing scanned their surroundings and mumbled. Who knows how many years and how much blood and sweat it'd take to build something like this. This really is. He seemed at a loss in finding words to describe it. Shilin could understand his feelings. After all, a stone cave was meant for cultivation and worshipping gods, and back then, his parents had also constructed caves for him. What heavenly official wouldn't be astounded by such a gigantic cave of 10,000 gods? If one of their own statues was to be worshipped in such a place, surely the divine state would be greatly benefited. Feng Xin was confused. What god is worshipped in this cave? Why are all the faces veiled? Naturally, it's to prevent us future passers-by from seeing, Shilin replied. Now that's strange, Mu Qing said. They could have just smashed the heads of the statues, so why must they go through this trouble? If you really wanted to see it, a thin veil like this can't prevent anything. As he spoke, he went up to peel away the veil of the nearest divine statue. Shilin hadn't yet had the chance to stop him when there was a chilling flash, and the tip of a silver blade hung not inches away from Mu Qing's fingers. The sudden murderous intent instantly made the air among the four tense. Feng Xin was alarmed. What are you doing? Even with the blade before him, Mu Qing didn't appear scared at all. Your scimitar looks just fine, so I say it's not in a good state. Hua Cheng was right behind him and said lazily, Didn't anyone teach you not to touch things randomly while in other people's territory? It's not your territory, so what justice are you upholding? Mu Qing countered. Hua Cheng said flatly, I just don't want to cause unnecessary trouble. This is Mount Tonglu, after all. Who knows what would happen if the veils are removed? I can't believe there'd be a day that an arrogant character like Crimson Rain Swordflower would be afraid to cause unnecessary trouble, Mu Qing said. Then his hand moved downwards to touch the robe of that statue. The scimitar Erming followed after and pointed at him once more. This time, I'm only trying to feel the material of the stone, not removing the veil. So why is Crimson Rain Swordflower stopping me again? Mu Qing questioned. Hua Cheng smiled vaguely. I'm stopping you from causing trouble. Shilin put himself between the two and said, Stop. It's not like we have to see what god is being worshipped here. We shouldn't stick around for too long. Let's leave first. Don't forget, we still have a mission to accomplish. Hua Cheng stared at Mu Qing's hand. Since Gurga says so, then have him put his hand away and I'll let this go. Mu Qing, back off, all right? Shilin pleaded. Mu Qing glared at him. Are you nuts? Why isn't it him who backs off first? What if I back off and he doesn't. Between a heavenly official and a ghost, Feng-Xin would naturally choose to stand on the side of the heavenly official. At most, we'll accept having both sides back off at the same time, he said. Huacheng showed no signs of backing off. You wish, he said. Seeing that neither side would back down, Xilin rested his hand on Mu Qing's arm and gently urged, Mu Qing, drop it. After all, you're the one who started this first, so you should be the first one to let go, all right? Think of it as giving me some face. I swear, if you back off, San Lang will keep his promise. Although Mu Qing wasn't too willing, after staying in a stalemate for a brief moment, he still slowly dropped his hand, and they returned to the rope. Finally, that taut string was relaxed, and Xilin also breathed a sigh of relief. It just so happened that they'd come to another fork in the road, and he turned to Huacheng. Which way do you think we should go this time? Huacheng seemed to have casually picked a path. Then, this way. Feng-Xin and Mu Qing were walking behind them and seemed to be at each other's throats again. But between their arguments, Mu Qing demanded, How did you two pick? Why this way? The two in front turned their heads back. It's random, they said. Feng-Xin frowned. How can you pick randomly? Let's not go blindly, lest we drop into some pit again. Huacheng smiled. Even if we drop into a pit, I have ways to take His Highness out. You can follow if you want. If you don't, then you can go off by yourselves. But to be honest, I don't want to rescue you again. You, they shouted. But that was the way Huacheng spoke. No matter if there was a smile on his face, and his tone was endlessly polite. The more he smiled vaguely, the more it enraged people. So much so that Feng-Xin tucked an arrow upon his bow. Xilin knew that he wouldn't actually shoot and said, Sorry about this, Feng-Xin, but in our current situation, it really makes no difference which way we go. Huacheng laughed heartily. Ooh, I'm scared. Looks like I'd best stay far away from you. He flicked his brows at Xilin and really did walk further away. Xilin knew he was only trying to leave the other two behind and smiled as he shook his head, ready to follow after him. When suddenly, Mu Qing reached out and pulled him to a stop. Xilin looked back, bewildered. Mu Qing, what is it? Yet, unexpectedly, Mu Qing didn't answer. He grabbed Xilin and ran straight for the other path, shouting, Now! Ahead, Huacheng also noticed something wrong and turned back to look. Yet Feng-Xin had already punched the stone wall, and boulders rumbled as they crashed, blocking the road. The two swiftly went forward, and in the flash of a second, slapped on 50 or so talismans on the rocks. Thus, Huacheng and the three of them were now separated by this pile of boulders.